Hey everyone, we're excited to have you as part of our most recent event, SEO for the CEO. Kind of as we're getting started here and waiting for people to join, please feel free to engage with the chat. We're going to be answering any questions that you have at the very end. We'll be joined by Heather, one of our marketing associates here at Go Fish Digital, who will be helping us kind of answer questions and really get some answers to the questions that you all want. As well, while we're kind of waiting for people to join, once again, feel free to engage with the chat. Please go ahead and type in where you're coming from, what you're interested in learning. Always really cool to see kind of all the different locations that kind of people are tuning in from. And really kind of to get started, what we want to talk to today is about SEO for the CEO. I've realized kind of over the past several years that a lot of the conversations that I've been having is really with more senior level marketers about like, hey, how can we get buy-in for an SEO initiative, or what do we need to be doing in order for senior leadership to really see the value in terms of what we're doing? So that was kind of one of the impetuses of starting this initiative, was really talking with a lot of senior marketers about how can we get more visibility for the search program, and how can we really put what we're doing as SEOs and put it into metrics that an actual senior leader can understand. So that's what we want to talk about today. Quick bit of background about myself and kind of Go Fish Digital. We're a full service digital marketing agency. A lot of support around SEO, digital PR, content marketing, reputation management. Those services kind of run the gamut. I'm often involved in a lot of the introductory calls we have with potential client partners, which is kind of why I'm oftentimes talking to people about how we can do better in terms of getting buy-in and investment for search initiatives. As well, we work with a wide range of client partners, right? Everything from some of the biggest e-commerce brands to large news publications to tech companies. The list kind of goes on and on. We generally say we work with everyone from mid-market to Fortune 500 companies. As well, I've also been included in a lot of different kind of thought leadership articles, Washington Post, NPR, Moz. Once again, a little bit of background as well. We've won quite a few awards, right? I think we just recently tallied it up over the past few years. We've won 30 plus awards, ranging from US Search Awards, Interactive Awards, Search Engine Land Awards, including something we're very proud of in terms of the fact that we've won Best SEO Agency 4 different times from the US Search Awards, the first one for small SEO agency, and then the last one for large. So a little bit more background about Go Fish Digital, and as well kind of my process. So today we're going to talk about is SEO for the C-suite. How as a community can we get more buy-in? How can we do a better job of communicating our values to some of the senior level marketers? So we're going to talk about a few different things here. First, we're going to talk about the CEO and SEO disconnect, right? Why sometimes is it hard for us to actually demonstrate our value to senior leadership? Next, we're going to talk about a little bit about how the CEO thinks about SEO, because it's very different than the way we as marketers think about it. We're much more in the weeds. Senior leadership might not be. So how can we actually get data to figure out how is senior leadership thinking about it, and how can we bridge that gap? Next, we're going to talk about some metrics to use. So when we're communicating, sometimes where I think a lot of SEOs fall short is in the metrics that they choose to position. One of the great things about SEO is that there's a ton of metrics to support and get data behind the decisions we make. One of the difficult things is due to that large quantity of metrics, it can be really hard to figure out what to apply when, and really when to present what different metrics. So we're going to talk about a little bit about metrics that a senior leadership, the CEO, might actually care about. We're going to talk a little bit about how to connect SEO recommendations based on those things. How can we actually connect our SEO recommendations back to that? And then finally, we're going to talk about SEO forecasting. So this is a part of SEO that I think a lot of marketers need to really embrace, is the ability to actually utilize forecasting when you're talking to senior leadership. So let's just talk a little bit about the problem, right? What is the problem that a lot of us face when communicating with the C-suite? Well, one of the things is we want to communicate like we're this person, right? I used ChatGPT and their DALL-E, and actually figured out, it's like, hey, here's an image of me and what is it like as a CEO? So this is CEO Chris. This is the person that we want to present to, right? What oftentimes ends up happening is we get in that meeting where we're in a quarterly meeting, or we're in a situation where we're trying to get buy-in for something, and then we end up feeling a lot more like this person, right? So a little bit more laid back, not as sophisticated, not as nuanced as we should be. And in our worst dreams, right, we think about we turn even to this person, right, where we're just completely not where we want to be in terms of our messaging, in terms of what we want to be conveying for the value of our initiatives. So why is there this disconnect, right? One is the ecosystem that we all operate in, right? This was a slide I gave at MozCon last year where it talks about all the different SEO tools we use. And it's great, right? We have access to all of these different things, right? Search Console, Google Analytics, Moz, Ahrefs, the list goes on and on. But which is really, really awesome. But then when we kind of take a step back, right? And we can even see just within an individual report, right? Here's just a Screaming Frog report. It's one of my favorite SEO tools. You can just see the level of detail this tool goes into. Something that senior leadership, they might not be getting into the weeds as much, right? Just looking at all the different reports, index tags, canonical tags, structured data, the list goes on and on. And as well, when we're taking a look at our reporting, right, oftentimes we're looking at things like organic visibility and first page rankings. And these are the metrics that we really lean on that, have an SEO partnership live or die by, right? Because we know that improving first page visibility is likely going to lead to more organic traffic, more leads, more revenue. So we're heavily involved in these are the metrics that we're looking at. Conversely, a CEO might be looking at something completely different, right? Their tool stack is much different than ours. Yes, they might have some tactical level tools, like maybe they use a CRM like Salesforce, or maybe they're using an ERP like SAP. A lot of the tools are probably more around communication tools, right? So Slack, PowerPoint, Teams, email. CEOs they're much more likely involved in having very, very meeting heavy days, right? Where they're getting input from all of these different stakeholders. So their job is a lot more communication focused, where SEO can be a lot more tactically focused, right? That's one of the key differences that we're often seeing between SEO and the C-suite is the different ecosystems that we look at. So moving on to the next part of this presentation here, as well, and instead of a ranking report, right, a CEO is looking at something like a P&L statement, right? That's one of the things they're using to judge the success of a program, right? They're not looking at first page rankings, but they're actually saying, hey, how much revenue did I earn in this specific product area, this vertical, what were my costs, and what was my profit on that, right? So they're often looking at very different types of internal tools that they're using in their day-to-day basis, and a lot different, right, reporting mechanisms, right? They're much more focused on revenue, bottom line, costs than we might as SEOs be typically doing. So now let's talk a little bit about how CEOs think about SEO, right? So how as we as a community, how can we get better data to understand how the CEO even thinks about search, right? Like CEOs, we know they're probably familiar with SEO broadly, but they probably don't understand the nuances. How can we get this data, right? This was a great tip that Daniel Russell, one of the partners at Go Fish Digital, gave to me, where he actually talked about, hey, you could use the Edgar database to understand how CEOs are talking about search. So for those who aren't familiar, Edgar SEC actually requires companies to publicly file their documents, right? And oftentimes someone from the C-suite has to actually sign off on these documents, right? It might not be the CEO, it might be the CFO or someone else, but the CEO is at least reviewing this, right? And this is all going through senior leadership. So this is a publicly available data set that we can get our hands on to better understand, right? So in Daniel's presentation, one of the good news is that we're seeing more and more SEO mentions in the Edgar database, more mentions of the term SEO. So this is great because now we can see that SEOs are starting to reference SEO more in these documents. But what we want to do is figure out specifically how they're referencing them in the Edgar database. So in this example, what I did is I just went into the database and I performed a search for SEO. And now we can just start to review the different documents, right? Here, we actually got over 6,000 different results returned, which is really great. So we're seeing a lot of people talking about SEO initiatives. Now we can actually go in some of these reports and see what does the CEO, how are they actually reporting on it? How are they talking about it, right? We can get these actual insights about how the CEOs are thinking about their search decisions. So let's just use a couple of examples, right? One example might be from the company Leafly, a big cannabis retailer. They talk about in their Embed database, they talk about how high quality of high search engine optimization or SEO ranking content library helped them attract an audience, right? So audience attraction, that's how they're referring to it in the Embed database. Cars.com is another example. And they're specifically talking about how they drove audience market share gains via sector leadership in SEO. So here they're not talking about rankings, but they're talking about market share. That's a very important point that we're going to come back to. Pinterest is another good example. So here they're actually talking about diversifying away from SEO, but we can still use it to determine how the CEOs think about it. And here they're talking about SEO as a growth channel, and actually how they're diversifying against their SEO initiatives by doing different marketing concepts. So 3 really great examples. And then just from going through these examples and then a few others, I was able to kind of aggregate some of the top ways that CEOs are referencing SEO in these documents, right? So talking about it as a diversifying growth channel, right? How can they be less reliant on things like paid ads or email? It's a diversifying growth lever for them. They're talking about it in terms of their market share. So in order to actually grow market share, they're using SEO to attract an audience, right? To attract their audience and have their users, their customers have a reason to come back. I also saw quite a few mentions of lowering acquisition costs. So once again, being less reliant on paid ads, but actually being able to use SEO to specifically lower acquisition costs in the actual results. And then finally, we also saw them reference increasing brand profile. So, and actually that would be more of a general branding play, but how can we use SEO to increase brand profile in general? So these are the ways we're seeing CEOs talk about search. But I think it's also important to cross-reference it to what they're not saying, right? Like, what are they not saying about SEO? They're not talking about in these reports how to improve our first page rankings or even to drive organic traffic or optimize crawl budget or optimize the site's EAT, right? They're much more business centric, right? They're much more focused on things like market share, growing content libraries, audience attraction, those types of things. So now that we're kind of a little bit through the webinar, I want to take a minute to just talk about GoFish Digital's broad consulting services. We do offer a large amount of SEO consulting services, including technical SEO support, technical SEO support, contextual SEO support, any types of on-page optimizations. It's not limited to larger content strategies, content gap analyses, UX improvements. If you're interested in any of these services, please go ahead and type something in the comments, and then we can go ahead and connect with you all afterward to see if that might be a good fit, or if you'd ever want to reach out to and talk to one of our support team in terms of how we can help support with your SEO initiatives. So I'll give a few seconds for people to leave their comments, and then we can circle back and see, and then have someone get in touch with you all. Cool. Ending this right now. So if you are interested, please feel free to reach out in the comments, and we'll be able to get in touch with you in terms of how we can help support any SEO efforts that you might want to be talking about. So now let's keep going and talk a little bit about how we can better demonstrate value to senior leadership and learn how senior leadership thinks about SEO. Another great way to do this is through the earning reports, right? This was a great recommendation given to me by Tom Critchlow, where he talked about how earning reports are really an invaluable asset to understanding how CEOs think about search. And similar to the content in the Egger database, right? Similar to the content in the Egger database, these are publicly available documents, right? We can actually see that these are publicly available filings. Here in this example, we can actually see Walmart's, and here we can actually see their different fourth quarter reports. These are generally available online, so we were able to find these via some of their online documents. So this is another great tip. You can just basically oftentimes Google for these, and that's a way you can actually find some of the investing reports that a lot of these CEOs are actually following, and talking about, and think about how they're actually thinking about some of their search initiatives. So now we're going to talk a little bit about like how we can use metrics that a CEO can like actually understand, right? This is going to be a really critical point of like how we get buy-in is to figure out how can we even use the right metrics for a CEO to better understand our search initiatives, right? So we're going to actually go back to kind of what we talked about earlier. What were CEOs talking about in the Egger database? One thing that they're talking about is market share, right? Market share is something that senior leadership commonly understands. How much of a given market does a competitor have? What percentage of total sales does a particular industry have? And then how can we attempt to impede or cut market share from a competitor? This is a really great way to think about your search initiatives. Instead of talking about total market share, what we can talk about is search market share. And the good news is like this is available in some of the tools that we all use. Different tools have different variations of this. Sometimes it's called share of voice. It's actually one of my favorites in the Ahrefs software. You can actually go to an organic competitors tool and it creates this really amazing bubble chart. You can plug your domain in and then a few competitor domains. And then you can see, hey, where is your market share in terms of really core competitors? So here might be an example site, and here might be your top 3 competitors. And then it's going to evaluate it in terms of how much organic traffic they're getting and what that traffic value is. This is a really great example, a way to present maybe a content strategy or a search initiative to say, hey, we want to cut into these competitor market shares, and these are the competitors that we're going to use to analyze this. So is the Ahrefs competitor, like the organic competitors report, really great way to get some of these insights in terms of like market share and how you can cut into them. And as well, you can also actually see like the actual percentage of market share. So this was an example we did for an e-Powerbike company. And here you can see actual percentage of shares that different competitors have. So based on this analysis, you might want to say, we're looking to cut into the competitor share of Rad Powerbikes because we know based on our analysis, they have the highest market share. Now we're going to talk about what content strategies can we do to cut into this? What technical opportunities are there for us that they're doing really well that we're not? You can also get a hard percentage to better estimate the value of what one of these competitors are doing. Content library is another really great metric that you can utilize, right? We saw that referenced in the Egger database. So what might a content library mean in terms of our actual tools? Well, one way that we can actually visualize a content library is, once again, using some of those really common SEO tools that we utilize. So in this slide, you can actually see, you can visualize internal page growth by using Ahrefs. So here what I did was I just took an individual client URL and then compared it against a competitor, to the client URL in blue, competitor URL in orange. And here we can see this competitor is actually really significantly generating new content and creating a larger content library than the individual client. So now we know, instead of saying, hey, we just need to generate more organic pages, now we need to say, hey, we need to really improve the content library that we have. And this is how we have to do it. This is either going to be service pages. It's going to look like informational articles. But now we're talking about a content generation strategy in terms of a way that a CEO or C-suite member can actually understand. The final way that we really like to better communicate SEO initiatives to C-suite members is to really drive everything down to profit. Once again, this was another great tip from Daniel Russell that he gave in a presentation in Search Love. And he basically talks about profit is the shortcut to really connecting any search initiative. And a search initiative doesn't always have to directly connect to profit, but every step down the line, we need to be funneling a recommendation to how it's going to impact profit, right? At the end of the day, if we go back to the P&L example, those are the reports that a lot of senior leadership are looking at, right? We need to be talking about how what the investment they're making in a search initiative is actually impacting the money, the profit that they're going to make at the end of the day. So maybe we have a recommendation to create authoritative content, and it doesn't directly connect back to profit. We can first say, hey, we're going to create 10 pieces of authoritative content. And then our aim is to improve rankings by 10% for these queries. As a result, it's going to drive this many leads. And then based on how much we know an average leads cost, this is what it's going to look like in terms of ROI. So here at the very top, we started with an authoritative content recommendation, something a little bit more difficult for senior leadership to connect with, but we've funneled it and drilled it into an actual search initiative. So that's a really great way that we can utilize SEO and better connect what we're doing into individual profit. So now the next part of this is what we're going to do is we're going to connect our SEO recommendations. We're going to actually connect our SEO recommendations. So we're going to take some of these findings that we've learned, right, and talk about, hey, how can we actually connect our recommendations to search, right? So like, what can we actually do to better use some of these metrics to actually connect them in terms of like how they're going to impact an individual search initiative. So first, let's say we were Walmart, right? And let's say we were Walmart, for example, and we wanted to talk about how we were going to connect individual search initiatives to Walmart, right? We were going to talk about how are we going to connect an SEO initiative to something that Walmart is doing. So we might have a recommendation where we might say, hey, we want to create more category and product pages that can get indexed by Google. Nothing wrong with this recommendation. It's a perfectly fine search initiative. It's a perfectly fine search recommendation, but it might be something that's a little harder for the C-suite to really connect with. So what we might do is instead of saying this, right, we might say, okay, well, before we make this recommendation, first we're going to look at your quarterly earning reports, right? We're going to Google for Walmart earning reports, and then we're going to figure out, hey, what are the key initiatives that Walmart is really working on from an overall business perspective? So we go in their earning reports, right? And we see, hey, found a quick excerpt here that we actually drove share gains in terms of grocery and general merchandise. So we know here, and then the third bullet here, we can see that sales strength was led by grocery and health and wellness. So here we can see that grocery is a really, really big priority for Walmart. So now we have some actual business insights in terms of what their senior leadership is actually thinking in terms of some of their most profitable areas, the areas that looking to go. And they're not talking about maybe the things we think about like electronics and cutting costs, right? Like they're talking about groceries. So we need to be connecting our search initiatives back to what they're talking about in these investment reports. So then what we could do is we could go back into Ahrefs. We could go into their organic competitors tool. We could plug in some of their top grocery retailers. So we know Kroger, Costco, and Albertsons are some of the really, really large SEO competitors. That's what we know in terms of the competitive analysis. So now we're going to analyze how they performed in terms of search. So now we've translated this into market share. We can see Walmart all the way over here in blue, right? We can see that companies like Kroger or Costco, they have much larger market shares in terms of their grocery offerings. So now we're able to connect this metric to say, hey, Walmart might be competitive in a lot of areas, especially around retail. But in terms of their investment reports, groceries, they're maybe not where they want to be, right? So now we can reframe our recommendation. Instead of create new organic pages to get indexed by Google, we can say, we need to create a digital program to close the market share gap between Walmart and key competitors like Costco and key competitors like Kroger. Now we've taken something that we know they've talked about in their investment reports, and we've connected it back to an actual search initiative. So let's take another example here. Let's say we're T-Mobile, and once again, we want to do the exact same thing. We're looking to just get a better understanding of how we can actually connect an individual search initiative back to SEO. So if we go in and we might say, hey, we want to optimize T-Mobile's core product pages, right? We want to do on-page optimizations for some of the most core service landing pages that you have on the site. Once again, nothing wrong with that, right? It's a perfectly good SEO recommendation, but it's something that might be, once again, a little harder for a SEO to connect back to. So once again, maybe we go back to their investment reports, right? And we say, hey, when we look at their investment reports, T-Mobile, they're talking really a lot about their Ultra 5G network coverage, right? That seems to be really a competitive differential that they see that they have among competitors. So when we look at their report, we see that that's something that they're continually highlighting, but that's something that might resonate within a key leadership, right? Like, how can we improve their content library and how can we improve their messaging around their really strong network coverage, right? So now we can start to go back into our more traditional SEO tools that we've done a little business research and understand what they're aiming for. Now we go back into Ahrefs and say, okay, we're going to look at T-Mobile, we're going to look at all the queries that you rank for, and we're going to say, hey, we just want to look at the 5G queries, right? Here we see they rank for 5G home internet and T-Mobile 5G internet coverage. Now we can start to see some queries that might connect with this messaging. And then we go and see, hey, when we search 5G internet, they're ranking on the first page, but maybe a little bit lower above more traditional publishers like CNET. So now we can go back and adjust our recommendation, right? Instead of broadly, hey, we're going to optimize key service pages. Now that we know the data behind the investment reports, we can say, hey, we have an initiative to spread digital awareness. We want to create an initiative to spread digital awareness about T-Mobile's 5G network leadership. So now, once again, we've better connected an individual SEO recommendation back to something that a member from the C-suite, they're actually going to care about, and they're actually going to know moves the needle for their business. So finally, let's kind of wrap things up by just broadly talking about forecasting SEO a little bit. I think this is another area for SEOs to really get more comfortable doing. I think for a lot of reasons, SEOs have a lot of healthy fear of forecasting. And it makes sense, right? Because we want to set realistic goals. We want to set realistic goals in terms of what people can achieve in terms of the search engines. But SEOs, when often asked to forecast, we often kind of give a big "it depends," right? But there's a problem with that, because a lot of other marketing channels, a lot of other marketing teams, they're not saying that, right? And they're comfortable giving forecasts. Whether it's paid, whether it's media, the CEO or the senior leadership, they're often really used to not only wanting forecasts, but really expecting them, right? And it's very common for them to get it from their different marketing departments. So we as SEOs need to better understand, hey, how can we forecast SEO, right? How can we get more comfortable doing this? Once again, Dom Critchlow put this in a really great way. Forecasts aren't necessarily like hard and fast promises, right? But they're more communication tools. Hey, what would it look like if we were able to achieve this level of traffic? Or what would that look like in terms of traffic? What would it look like in terms of market share gains? And what would it look like, most importantly, in terms of leads, in terms of profits? That's oftentimes what a lot of senior leadership is expecting in terms of the forecast that they're actually getting. So we're going to walk through, there's a few different forecasting tips, right? One, use annualized values, right? That's going to really just put a better perspective, make the numbers look bigger, right? Instead of just month-to-month numbers, going to have people do less mental math in terms of what it looks like on an annualized value. Two is present different scenarios. We don't live in a perfect world. So oftentimes it's really good if you want to give yourself some buffer to better present different scenarios, right? Maybe a conservative scenario, an expected scenario, and a really aggressive scenario about what you're going to be able to achieve with your search initiatives. Three is then choose between a different forecasting model. This is obviously going to change depending on what you're looking to forecast. We're going to walk over 3 different models that you can use in terms of your forecasting. And then finally, tie it back to revenue and profit, right? Don't just only forecast for what the search impact is. Talk about exactly what the revenue, what the profit impact is going to be to an individual client partner. So we're going to talk about 3 different forecasting models. First, we're going to talk about a percentage growth goal. This is just going to be the simplest. Next, we're going to talk about a market share capture. And third, we're going to talk about competitor rolling average. The third is a really interesting one, a really exciting one, because it actually reflects real data in the search engines that you can utilize. So firstly, let's talk about percentage growth, right? Percentage growth is basically applying a basic percentage of what you think is going to impact the overall traffic. So this is the most basic forecasting model. So let's say in scenario 1, we have an annual organic traffic of 1 million sessions a year. What we're going to do is just propose 3 different scenarios here, one at 15%, one at 20%, and then one at 25%, and then estimate what the net organic traffic of that initiative would be. So very simple here, based on maybe, how much average, how much content we're producing, what the total opportunity is. We're just going to apply a very simple percentage in terms of how much we think we're going to be able to impact this. So if you're just starting off with forecasting, this is the most basic way to go. There's ones that are a little bit more, but the drawback of it is it doesn't reflect actual search landscape, right? You're just guessing based off a percentage, you're forecasting based off a percentage. You're not actually forecasting based off of, actual hard data in the search engines. Next, we're going to talk about a market share capture. So market share capture, instead of talking about instead of your site's results, you're actually going to use a very large competitor and then talk about how much market share you think you could capture. So now we're starting to connect this back to actual data in the search engines. So here, maybe let's say this competitor has 5 million organic sessions a month. we can walk through different scenarios. In scenario 1, we'll talk about how we capture 2% of that market share. In scenario 2, we'll talk about 5%. And in scenario 3, we'll talk about what happens if we capture 10% of that market share, and then estimate the net organic traffic that you're going to be able to get at each level. So the benefit of this one is we're talking about actual competitors here, right? So if we know there's a competitor that just dominates a search space, or someone that maybe the client or your company is really, really dedicated on kind of catching, this is a really good way to do that, is figure out who are we going to go after, right? Who's our number one competitor in the space? And let's create a targeted campaign where we actually go after their search traffic, and then present these different values along the way. So this is going to be the third one here, and this is going to be what's called a rolling competitor average. So a rolling competitor average is basically, we're going to take that top competitor and then figure out exactly how much they grew year to year in the search results. So this is a little bit more complex, but the best part about it is that actually represents like actual competitor growth. So in this example, we go into Ahrefs and we can go into any individual competitor organic traffic here. And then what we can do is that we can actually export that data. And when you export the data, you'll get kind of an Excel sheet that looks like this. It'll have every single month from that competitor. Then it'll have their average organic traffic. And then what you can do is you can actually go in and see, hey, month to month, hey, in July of 2022, they dropped by 7%, but then in August, they improved by 8%. And then in September, they improved by 23%. Now you can actually see how much a competitor was gaining or jumping from a month-to-month basis. And then you can get actual data on whether or not that's possible for your company. So now all of a sudden we can go in and say, hey, based on the rolling average, right? We can analyze 3 different competitors. We can say, hey, competitor 1, when we took a look at their 2-year rolling average, they average improving by about 6.5%. Competitor 2, when we took a look at their rolling average, they average improving by 9%. And competitor 3, when we looked at their rolling average, they average improving by 11%. So now we're actually using actual competitor growth data as observed in the search results to better forecast exactly what we're doing or exactly the results that we could have in terms of the search engines. So this is another really, really great one that you can utilize in order to better forecast actual results in the search results. So those are my 3, right? We have simple basic percentage one, a market share capture, and finally a rolling competitor average based on actual competitor results in the search results. So the final kind of aspect of this is to actually translate all of these numbers right into revenue or profit. We didn't do that before, just to kind of showcase each individual scenario. But finally, what you're going to want to do is, regardless of the model that you pick, you're going to want to translate into what does that actually mean in terms of revenue. So you need a couple of different data points in order to do this. You'll need the conversion rate on the site, and then you'll need average lead value, average order value, whatever average kind of conversion value you're using. And that way you're going to be able to convert your net organic traffic revenue into actual net revenue for the client, or a net revenue for the individual partnership that you're talking about. So here in this example, where we went back to our very basic forecasting model of 15, 20%, and 25, but now we applied a 2% conversion rate, and now we know our average order value is $100 each. So now, based on the search initiative, we can say if we improve organic traffic by 15%, well, based on the data, right, we know that that's going to improve revenue by $300,000 annually. And if we were to improve it by 25%, we know that we'd improve it by $500,000 annually. So now what we've successfully done is we've moved it from a search initiative, right? We've actually connected it to an actual business initiative. How are we having an impact in terms of profit? How are we having an impact in terms of the actual top level revenue that we're coming in? And presenting something like this is so much more powerful. You're going to really do a good job of showing that, one, you understand the business value, you understand what the individual senior leadership is going for, and you understand exactly that they're making an investment in the search initiative, and you're talking about how they can actually realize a return on that individual investment. So that takes us to the end of the presentation today. Once again, if there's anyone who's interested, I'll take a moment here to please talk about kind of our SEO support. You can scan this QR code here. If you are interested in SEO support, we'd love to help. We'd love to reach out. If you're someone who is interested in talking to senior leadership more about SEO, or you're looking to really up your game in terms of anything, whether it's technical SEO recommendations, content strategy, we'd love to talk about how we can kind of help and support. So please scan that QR code and please get in touch. And we'd love to kind of chat a little bit more about how we can help support in any way. We've left room for questions. So if anyone has any questions, give you about 30 seconds to add those to the chat here. If not, we can end the stream early a little bit and give everyone a little bit of time back in their day. So give you all 15, 20 seconds to see if anyone has any questions about these initiatives. And if not, happy to kind of to talk to things further. Cool. Doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but if there's anything that ever pops up, please feel free. Don't hesitate to reach out. And of course, really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy days to attend. Love to stay in touch, and have a great day, everyone.